Let's welcome former Acting Secretary of Homeland Security, Chad Wolf. It's great to have you on, sir. Your reaction to today's events?
Well, thanks for having me on. I think today's events show that our criminal justice system works. If we give it a chance, the right verdict, the right sentence will follow. So that would be the first thing I would say. Second thing would be, some of the comments that we've heard you talk about recently from Maxine Waters, from President Biden and others. I think that's concerning for law enforcement. I think that's concerning for the criminal justice system. And then lastly, I would say that it's time for the president and the vice president to talk about the good things that law enforcement does each and every day. They talk a lot about holding them accountable, and they talk a lot about ways to reform them, but they need to come out in support of law enforcement and the fact that they risk their lives every day to protect Americans.
Okay, let's get back to the comments that you said were concerning from the president and from Maxine Waters. Can you explain that?
Well, sure, absolutely. So anytime you have a sentencing going on, or I should say a trial going on, and you have outside politicians, you have outside leaders and officials that folks look up to, particularly juries and others, such as a sitting congresswoman or certainly the president of the United States, anytime that they're making comments about the right verdict needs to be rendered, obviously that's having an impact on the overall mindset of some of those jurors. So what would have been appropriate is obviously Maxine Waters not making an appearance there, not making those types of comments. I mean, can you imagine if those comments were made earlier in the year by the other side, by a Republican member of Congress, what type of calls for resignations and everything else that would have occurred? And that's the concern, I think, from a law enforcement perspective. If we're going to treat violence is violence, and we need to call out any official that condones that or somehow embraces that. And the fact that no member of the Democratic Party today wanted to vote for censure, I think, is telling.
The president just moments ago, we were just talking about it with Brett Tolman and Dr. Alveda King. He said this: the jury in the George Floyd case carried out their civic duty under extraordinary pressure. It took all of that for justice to deliver basic accountability. This comes on the same day that the president was accused of interfering in this case by publicly commenting about it, by saying he prays for the right verdict. It's overwhelming. So people were stunned. Legal, political, media, even experts were saying they were stunned to see a sitting president weigh in on a criminal case as a jury was deliberating it, as before it went to the verdict. So what was your thought when you heard that?
Well, I would agree. I don't think that that's a usual statement, certainly by a sitting president or, again, any elected official. You don't want to think, or you certainly don't want to articulate that you had to put pressure on the criminal justice system to render a verdict. I think that's what most Americans are skeptical about. I think most Americans believe that our criminal justice system does work and that you need to give it a chance at the end of the day. And the vast majority of the time, it renders the right decision. But you don't need outside pressure, and you don't need these types of comments from a sitting president or members of Congress about, the right verdict needs to be rendered, or you need to get confrontational. We need to get in front of them. That's the wrong signal to be messaging the American people. They need to have faith in the criminal justice system. They need to have faith in law enforcement. And some of these statements fly in the face of that.
The second thing that the president said in his remarks tonight, people are struck by. We're getting feedback coming into the studio from experts and people who are watching this case. He said, the president finally acknowledged that looting and rioting is wrong. This comes after the Democrats and the president did not, when he was candidate, bring up violent looting and ransacking and riotings being wrong at their Democrat convention. Let me bring. In fact, Democrats are being criticized for not saying more, to say stand down, stop destroying minority neighborhoods, stop destroying minority businesses, $2 billion in damages, and 30 people dead at least in the rioting over the last year. Here's a quote. Here's the president. those who seek to exploit with violent protests, who seek to destroy property, they must stop. He's saying it's time to unite. He's saying they're ruining the march to racial justice. He full stop ended it there. There was so much that was left out of the president's remarks that are found wanting, that he didn't give a full picture of what has been going on the streets of America over the last year. What do you think?
Well, I should say I give him some credit for at least those remarks, but I absolutely agree. These types of remarks and even stronger remarks needed to really occur during the summer of 2020 as he was running for the presidency, and certainly as it got closer to the election and all the times in between. There were multiple instances where we had looting and rioting going on across America in various cities where time after time after time, the Democrats, and particularly President Biden and Vice President Harris, simply would not condone it. They said everything but condoning the violence that's going on and taking place. And so I think the American people see through the hypocrisy that, one political party is only going to comment on the violence if it suits them for their political ends. And that's just wrong. Again, we need to call out violence, any form of violence when we can, whether it's on the right, the left, or in the center. Violence is violence, and we need to address that. And so I'm happy that he addressed it a little bit. It should have been done a long time ago, and certainly to your point, it could have been a lot more meaningful and forceful.
Chad Wolf, great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us. You're watching it.
Thanks for watching the Heritage Foundation's YouTube channel. With more than 500,000 members, we are the nation's largest conservative research and education institution. We believe the principles and ideas of the American founding are worth conserving and renewing. Please help us further our mission by subscribing to this channel and sharing our videos with your family and friends.